Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a lot to go over, not enough time, so let's just get right into it. I want to get your reaction today to what we heard from Senator Alex Padilla, which is that he's keeping the door open, in so many words, to running for governor. You had said that former Vice President Kamala Harris, if she had jumped into the race, would be near field clearing. Do you think that that's the same case for Senator Padilla?
Well, I'm really focused on the race that I'm running. I've been having a great time running this race, talking to people across the state. The work that Senator Padilla is doing in Washington, particularly on immigration, which is a federal issue, has been so meaningful. And I've heard that across the state as I talk to Californians. So this is a big field. I'm proud to be at the front of it, and I'm going to work hard to keep it that way.
Do you think there's room for more folks to get into the field?
Well, I think there will be more folks because this is California. So I wouldn't say that we're fully done yet.
You came out early in support of Governor Newsom's redistricting ballot measure. Do you plan on doing anything more to ensure that the measure passes?
Oh, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it passes. And I think one of the things I can offer is the perspective of somebody who went through that process. So I ran for Congress. I flipped a Republican seat. I served 2 terms. The census occurred. I got redistricted. And then I had to run in a very, very different community. And so I think I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not in Congress right now, but I think I can be a really good ambassador for helping people to understand that what California is doing here is very, very little d democratic. It is asking the people of California if they want to do things differently, because our democracy is in a very, very different place than it was. So I can both explain the Independent Redistricting Commission, what we'll be going back to in 2030, but can also talk about what it's like to be redistricted. It can be a real opportunity to get to talk to new people, to learn more about California, to sharpen your political skills. So I hope to be on the road, campaigning, working on Prop 50. I teach legislation at the UCI Law School, and yesterday, Monday, our topic was redistricting. So I had a lot of material to work with.
Do you see yourself raising money for it? I mean, obviously, you've got your own campaign to worry about, but what does it mean when you say you'll do everything that you can? Is there going to be a ballot measure committee?
Yeah, so I've already done, I think, 4, 5, 6 national TV hits. I'm going to keep doing media, as I mentioned. I'm going to keep answering straight, direct, give good answers to questions when this comes up. If there's an opportunity to help raise money, count me in. I've raised a lot of money for a lot of Democrats over the years, and this is really important to making sure that our democracy is there. Californians want a fighter. They want a fighter for their governor, and they want a fighter now against Trump until as we're in this process right now.
So I think most people, especially nationally, they know you as the lady with the whiteboard who could leave CEOs tongue-tied. But when you launched your campaign, you talked about supporting workers and business at a forum hosted by the California Chamber of Commerce. You said that you did not support raising the state minimum wage. Do those who see you as an anti-corporate warrior, did they get it wrong?
No, so look, having clear rules for businesses that work, that protect workers, keep them safe on their jobs, that give clear guidelines to consumers so they get what they're paying for, making sure that products that are sold in our marketplace are safe. Those are the kinds of good business regulations that benefit the 99.9% of good businesses that we have here in California. So we're definitely going to have to make sure that we're thinking about how do we keep businesses growing. Californians need business. We need businesses to give us healthcare, to give us jobs. This is part of how we're going to compete globally. But you can do business and make sure that you're doing right by workers and by consumers. And we have so many businesses that do that. And I've enjoyed talking to so many of them. I'm looking forward to talking to more of them. But I think we have to be a champion for all the things that business is doing right. And this is also important to small businesses, to entrepreneurs. They're going to follow the rules. We have to make sure that we have clear rules that are enforceable so that everybody can follow them and that those rules really deliver for workers and consumers.
So we just had Secretary Becerra on. He was.
I didn't notice.
I didn't notice. There's been a lot of folks in and out off the stage today. He talked about how he's in favor of a single-payer healthcare system for the state, although also said he was pragmatic, realized that may not be feasible, perhaps, but universal coverage being the goal. You've backed Medicare for All on the federal level. If you were elected governor, would you pursue a state-level single-payer system?
So in traveling across California and listening to people, it is very clear that we have a lot of work to do on healthcare. We had some challenges with regard to cost, with regard to coverage, before Donald Trump came and attacked our Medi-Cal system, attacked our women's reproductive health and abortion providers. We have real challenges for people. So I think that has to be the first goal, figuring out how we can defend California. Single payer is a great idea. That's why I've always championed the idea. At the federal level, it will really work, I think, to help do the cost containment. And we have some models there at the federal level. Things like Social Security, Medicare, things like TRICARE for our veterans and our military members. We've got models there. At the state level, right now, we got to fight to hang on to as much care as we can for every single Californian. I don't think it's realistic in the next couple years for the state to push forward on that, at least not until we make sure that we're stabilizing our own healthcare system.
I also want to talk to you about AI, which obviously has been another major topic here today. Governor Newsom has vetoed major proposals to regulate AI. Is he too friendly to tech on this front?
I think Governor Newsom's new report that came out a few months ago on AI is really, really helpful in laying out a framework for how to think about AI. The power, the potential of AI is tremendous, and Californians should want that power to be harnessed for them, to create good, high-paying jobs, to make government work better, to make their lives easier, to help keep us safer. There are a lot of really positive applications that we could see for AI, and we should be figuring out as a state, how do we move forward on that? We have seen other really groundbreaking technologies that were, I think, sometimes daunting to people, things like nuclear engineering, things like gene editing. What we've seen in that context is the best way to approach a good regulatory framework is globally, because this technology has such a power and such a capacity to cross borders. So I think California has done some bills, for instance, banning kiddie porn, AI-generated kiddie porn. That's about keeping Californians safe. I think that was absolutely something I supported, and Governor Newsom signed that into law, as he should have. But right now, we have national security concerns around AI. Those might be best something addressed at the federal level. But I think Governor Newsom did the right thing by asking Californians to engage more on this topic, producing a report that gives us a footprint to follow forward.
So for the labor unions, who I think see AI regulation as one of their top priorities, am I hearing this right, that you're saying that really needs to be tackled more on a federal level and would not necessarily be a priority for you as governor?
I think it depends on what the issue is with regard to AI. A governor has few jobs more important than making sure the economy is growing and making sure that people have good, high-paying jobs. So we've got other industries in transition, whether that's energy, whether we've had medical in transition. This is not the first technology to come around, and so I think the governor's always going to have to think about how do we grow those jobs. So one of the things is I'm having a lot of conversations with unions. What are the kinds of jobs that are going to be created by AI? How can we create union jobs in those areas? What kinds of jobs could AI be doing that are dangerous for your members right now, that result in high rates of injury? Can we use AI to make these jobs safer, to make them easier for workers? But you have to make sure that you're growing jobs for California, and so I think that's a conversation you're going to continue to have with labor, and I have really appreciated that a lot of them have given a lot of thought. Some of them are seeing on the ground in their lives already how AI is being used, so I think workers have a really important perspective here to talk about how AI is working, how it isn't working, and to help ground a governor going forward on policy.
I want to jump, we're just a rapid fire through all of these policy issues. Let's talk about housing. SB 79 is a measure that allows for higher density development around transit hubs. You came out in support of this measure early, among gubernatorial candidates at least. There's been a lot of backlash to this legislation, particularly in local communities, even places like the Pacific Palisades, which of course were devastated by wildfires. They're raising concerns about evacuation concerns, right, because of this development. As governor, how do you convince local communities to get on board with statewide efforts to build new housing?
So look, I think Californians across the state understand that we are in a housing shortage, and we are short of housing of virtually every type. We don't have enough housing for workers. We don't have enough housing for students, for seniors, for all kinds of Californians. We have housing affordability challenges in rural parts of our state too. It's not just a coastal or a big city phenomenon. We need to build more housing. And I think the goal of SB 79 is to say, where we already have a transit hub, where we already have that density, then it makes sense to add more. And so I think when we hear about the Palisades, let's be clear, Pacific Palisades, not a transit hub, right? There's very, very limited transit there, so SB 79 is not going to be applicable in that community. It would take generations of change to transform the Palisades into a community where SB 79 would be helpful, but we do have those communities right now, and housing is the #1 thing that I hear about from people. Can my kid afford to live here? Am I going to be able to afford to live here when I retire? People have mortgages later into life. Rent has gone up. We have to build more housing. That is a no-brainer, and I think SB 79 is an important step. Our next governor is going to need to be a leader, not just in fighting Trump and in solving Californians' biggest challenges. That's why I came out in favor of it. This is not a time to be timid. This is a time to take action.
But there are Democrats who I think you would probably agree with in other fronts, people like Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, the majority of the overwhelmingly Democratic City Council in Los Angeles, they oppose it. Why are they wrong?
Well, so I think the issue is that we need every part of California to be doing their part on housing. Every community needs to do their part. How they do that part is going to look different in the community. So if you're representing rural California and you've got, or a small city in California, you don't have any transit hubs. That doesn't mean we don't need you to build housing. This is a partial solution. So I think the answer is for cities that want to grow, for cities that want to attract workers who want to retain our UC and CSU and community college graduates into those good high-paying jobs, they need to have housing for those people to be in. California has an aging population. That is not a recipe for growth, and it's one of my top priorities to reverse that and make California the place of choice for our next generation of workers while making sure it's a place that our longtime Californians can retire in and thrive. And to do that, we need more housing. So I disagree on this. I think this is a leadership issue, and the governor has to think about the whole state and has to set policy that's going to allow those communities that are ready to take advantage of SB 79 to go ahead and get building.
One of the hottest debates in Democratic circles this year is about abundance. This is this book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson that argues that overregulation and bureaucracy has plagued democratically run cities, and that's exacerbated the housing crisis. Do you consider yourself an abundance Democrat?
Well, I definitely consider myself someone who is willing and thinks it's incredibly important, actually, I'm really, I would say, driven to look at regulation to see if it's doing what it is supposed to be doing. You know, my minivan, my license plate is oversight, and I think that's important. You need to be asking yourselves, is this regulation helping? California has a lot of regulation that was supposed to result in building more housing. Is it working? If it's not, we can't be afraid to go back to the drawing board and try to right-size it. So I think the benefit of abundance is really to point out that we need to be clear-eyed about our goals and our priorities. We can all have good quality housing in this country. We can have green energy that is affordable for everybody. But we've got to set our priorities. We have to stick to it, and we have to be willing to look back at regulations of the past and ask ourselves if they're serving us going forward. I think that's just an appropriate part of doing oversight. And one of the things I would say is I want to work side by side. California has a lot of talented legislators. They have a lot of ideas, and I want to really help make sure that they are thinking about if this bill becomes law, if the governor signs it into law, when I sign it into law, is it going to work on the ground to make the change they want? And to do that, you have to really be thinking about how the implementation is going to go. What's the job of the agencies going to be? Do we have the funding? Do we have the personnel? Because the job does not end at the press conference where we see too many politicians patting themselves on the back for making a law. The job of an elected leader is to make people's lives better. And that is going to be about going all the way through the process to see how the regulation is working on the ground. And I think abundance asks us to question that. And I think that's an appropriate question to ask. And I think the answer is going to depend on the particular regulation.
This would be your first executive job. You have been serving in these legislative roles. So I'm wondering, For a lot of people who are wondering like what Katie Porter, the executive, would look like, what is that? Have you given any thought about what your executive leadership skills are going to be?
Yeah, so a couple things I would say. One, we mentioned this is a leadership job, and this is a moment in which people want their government to lead. I think that's true actually across political parties right now. I think this is a moment where people want a leader who is honest with them, a leader who's going to be a straight shooter about where we are, what's working and what's not working. And I think I have a reputation for being a truth teller and being willing to take on anyone who's kind of standing in the way of making lives better for Californians. And so I think this is very consistent with what I've done. I think people saw my creativity when I got to Congress. Not treating hearings like something where you just show up and play with your iPhone. I went into hearings and I made those hearings deliver for people, whether that was free COVID testing, whether that was answers from CEOs. And so I think that's the kind of creativity and the energy that we need in this moment. I also come at this job from a personal perspective. I am a mom of 3 school-age kids. I did finally manage to ship one off to college yesterday. But the other 2 are still there. And so I think a lot about what do they want? What do they need? So we often hear elected leaders talking about their parents, and they're grateful for their parents. I'm grateful for my parents. My parents were awesome, and I was not easy to parent. But I really think about how do we meet the needs and anxieties of my kids? And so I think that is something that motivated me to run for Congress in the first place. The last thing I'll say is, I ran for Congress in 2017, got elected in 2018 because of Donald Trump. So I have only ever served in a politics in which, unfortunately, Donald Trump was attacking California, attacking our democracy, attacking healthcare. I could go on, but I will not. So I think I'm really ready and familiar with how do you punch back, how do you fight. I'm a street fighter, and I think that's what's called for in this moment.
We are, of course, the clock is running down, but I want to invite you to show your credibility as a truth teller. What do you think is something that California Democrats have not really been truthful with the voters that you would like to say to the crowd here? Yeah,
so I think housing is a really good one here. I think that there's a lot of pushback. You mentioned about abundance, whether that's a good or a bad strategy. Well, then the onus is on Democrats who oppose that to come up with other good ideas. We can't be the party of no, that won't work. If we say no, that won't work, we need to say, and I have an idea that will. And so when we look at some policies, rent control hasn't really on aggregate lowered housing costs in California. We can't keep going back to that. Statewide voters have rejected it 3 times. We need good new ideas around housing. And so I think that is an example of, with all respect for people who have advocated for that in the past, it's not where voters are, and the data doesn't back it up. So then we need to come up with new, fresh ideas.
Okay, I do have 1 more minute, so I'll slide in one.
I should have given a longer answer.
You should have filibustered more, which is something that I'd never say. But this is your second statewide run in 2-3 years. What did you learn from that first run where I think you could say you were disappointed with how you placed that last time? That is informing your run this time around.
Yeah, so I think I learned about California regionally, right? I was from I'm representing Orange County. That's where I live. That's where I'm raising my family. I got a chance to travel statewide to meet a lot of leaders and to build relationships. And so relationships are going to be so important to our next governor, putting the right people into administration positions, making sure that we're communicating with what we're trying to do, making sure that we're hearing that criticism and getting that feedback. And so I think I built relationships is the most important thing I got out of that run. And then I was able to hit the ground running with a lot of those relationships established, both with the people who kind of have different positions of elected officials, labor, business, but also with everyday Californians. I had done a lot of listening to what was on the mind of Californians. And that cost of living issue, talked a lot in my Senate campaign about cost of living, about affordability, and I think we are really at a moment where that is what people want from their governor.
All right, the red light's blinking. We have to go. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.